Okay, welcome back everybody. Welcome to the Pro Tips and Tricks videos from Fauna and Focus. If you're just joining new, I recommend you go back to the beginning and watch some of the earlier videos in the series just to get a better understanding of what we're doing. But now that we've gone through some of the introductory stuff and we've given everybody a basic understanding of what computers are and how they work and so on, now we're going to get more into Windows. And so as I've mentioned before, this is all going to be around Windows-based computers, which is what me and my team use. And unfortunately, if you're a Mac user, I can't help you. Those things are alien to me. So in this tutorial video, we're going to go through Windows settings. And the reason we're going to do this is because a lot of people get a bit overwhelmed with how their computers are actually working. And when problems come up, they're not sure how to diagnose them. And so what this will do is basically give you an introduction of all the various control settings for your computer, where they are, what they're called, what they do, and how to adjust them. We're not going to go into super details on all of them, but this video will be an overview of the various settings that you can access, as well as kind of my personal perspective on which settings you should be more familiar with and which ones don't matter so much because we don't use them very often, and you probably won't need them. So to begin with, how do you get to the settings menu? So there's actually, as with everything in computers, there's many ways to do it. The first way would be to come over down here to your Action Center or your Notification Center, and you have this All Settings button, and it'll open like this. This is your Windows settings. And again, if yours is a different color, don't worry, I just have mine set to dark mode because it's nicer on my eyes. If for some reason when you open this you don't see this settings button, you might have your quick links here collapsed. So you'll notice that now my settings is not available. So if you see something like this, you can try clicking expand and you'll see some quick shortcuts to a lot of additional settings. Within that is all settings that I can click on to open this. That's one way to get there. Another way to get there is to go to your start menu, and you should see right above your power button settings. Same thing, gets you to the same place. And of course, as always, you can click start and just start typing settings, and you will see this app come up. It is a gear, and you should be familiar with the fact that whenever you see a gear, that typically will allow you to access the settings for whatever you're looking at. So that will bring you to the same place. Now, if you want even more options, as we'll discuss with the start menu customization, once you see an app in your start menu, you can actually right-click it and choose to pin it from the taskbar or pin it to start. So if you pin it to a taskbar, what you'll see is that it will get stuck down here permanently. So if I pin this to the taskbar and I close this, you'll see that now it's right there. So it's actually now a button on my taskbar living there. I can put it wherever I want. And when I click it, it'll open that settings menu. I'm going to go ahead and unpin that from there because I don't need that. You can also pin it to the start menu. And so for me, I have it pinned right there because I do access it a lot. It's the same as this. It's just easier to see. And sometimes I'm using a touch device, and with the bigger button, it's easier to touch that button. Okay. Once you are in your Windows settings, there's an important thing to point out, and that is that you have a search bar at the top. If you are not certain where your settings that you're looking for is, you can just start typing something and it will likely find what you're looking for. So let's say I want to change the default program. Let's say I'm opening a PDF file and it's using a strange PDF reader, but I want it to use the Adobe PDF reader. That would something that you would be doing by changing the default application for PDF. So I might type default, and there you go. The first thing that shows up is default apps. So choose a default app for each file type. So I can click either of these and it will bring me straight to the setting where I set default apps for various things. And once you're in there, you can choose to, complete your whatever you were setting out to do. You can do it, and then you can click home to go back there. That's the first way of accessing a setting. Another way, once again, straight from your start menu, you can do the same thing. So you can just start typing change default app. Yeah, so there you go. Look, it says choose a default web browser. That's close to the setting I want, but right there, look, under settings, it says choose a default app for each type of file. That's actually what I want. When I click on it, it's going to load that same settings menu and jump straight there. And so here's where I would be able to associate different file types to different particular programs. And again, if I go back, then it brings me back to the previous menu and so on. So the way the settings menu is organized is by these broad categories, and I'll go through each of these now with you guys. There are some that are more important and some that are less important. I'll tell you right now, the ones that I'm not really going to go into in this one are the phone, because this is not something that I personally do. The gaming, because again, this is, for our work. We don't need to be worried about gaming right now. Ease of access, which is the area where you would go if you're speech impaired, hearing impaired, or sight impaired. This is not something that pertains to me, and unfortunately, therefore, I don't know very much about it. And the search as well. And so the search is pretty straightforward. It's just a search function to manage to find files or permissions that are missing. So we're not going to go through those, but I will go through each of the other ones a little bit and tell you which ones I think are important, which subsettings you should be a bit familiar with. So we're going to start with system, because that's the first one, and that's actually one of the most important ones to be familiar with. So if you click on system, just as when you click on any of these, you'll have a list of settings there on the left. And so we're very quickly going to scroll through these and talk about what they mean. For some of these, I will do additional videos at a later point in time. Display, for example, I actually have another video where I'm going to go through and talk about the display and what this all means, so you can look for that if you're interested in that. The same with sound. So sound, I have a separate video coming that will go through how to adjust your inputs and your outputs and so on. Notifications and actions. Take note of these little icons on the left. I want you guys to kind of be familiar with these icons, because that one looks quite familiar. You should recognize that this icon is actually from this little spot down here. So your notification area, right? And so basically, this is the settings to control how this notification area works. And so from this submenu in the settings, you can choose, you can set all sorts of conditions for those settings. So you can, allow notifications to play sounds or not. You can show them on the lock screen or not. There's all sorts of interesting things you can do over here with your notification settings over there. Quick actions. So you can add, remove, or rearrange your quick actions directly in Action Center. So if I click Edit Quick Actions, look what happens. It comes up and now it lets me rearrange the position of these actions, just like it would on your smartphone. So if I decided that I actually wanted this all settings one to be on the top row, I can just adjust that there. I don't need airplane mode that often. I'm going to bring that down. Same with this. Same with this, and same with this. So I'll just bring those to the bottom. And this one I don't use so much. And there we go. That's looking pretty nice. So what this allows me to do is kind of quickly prioritize the settings for me that I find the most important. So for me, it's going to be, actually, I'm going to do it like this. So I can set my focus assistant, which will disable all incoming notifications, my nightlight, which is softer on the eyes, Bluetooth, and my network, and then all settings will be towards the top. And then the settings that I use less frequently will be at the bottom. You can add more, or you can click done. So I'm going to click done, and now it's arranged like that. I'm even going to collapse it, so it's just the ones that I use the most often. So these little icons will help you understand what these are. Focus Assistant. So we just saw that. There was an icon in there called Focus Assistant, right? There it is. So this Focus Assistant settings menu will allow me to set the conditions for what that does. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You can just read through this and see what it does. And that's that. Now, power and sleep, this is an important one to understand. And please note that if you are on a laptop, you will see some other options here. I'm right now on a desktop, and so I can't see all the options that you might see. There's two things to know in power and sleep settings. You basically have two conditions. So the first one is your screen, and the second one is sleep. And so right now, the setting that I have to save power is that when this computer is plugged in to a power source, right? I want the screen to turn off after 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes, it goes black. Now the computer's still on, it's just the screen is off, so it's saving a little bit of energy. And then sleep is when the computer will kind of save everything it's doing to the RAM, to the short-term memory, right? Not your hard drive. It's saving it to the RAM, to the short-term memory. It'll save your current state of work, save it to the RAM, to the short-term memory, and then it will shut down, essentially. And the benefit of sleep is that it turns on much faster this way, right? If everything is saved to the short-term memory, to the random access memory, RAM. And so I've got that set to do that after just 10 minutes of inactive use. And so don't worry, if you're watching a film or you're doing something, it knows that, and it won't turn it off after 10 minutes of watching a film. But in general, if you walk away from your computer and it's not doing something, it's not playing a video or something, it says, all right, well, you're not using me, so after 10 minutes of inactivity, I'm going to go to sleep. Now, for laptops, you will have the same two options with two conditions, either plugged in or on battery power. If you are on battery power, you might want to set a shorter time than if you're plugged in. So for example, this is a desktop computer. It's always plugged into the wall. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and increase this to, let's say, turn off after 20 minutes the screen, and then it will actually go to sleep after 30 minutes of no use. So if I was on a laptop, maybe I want it to just be 5 minutes and 10 minutes because I want it to save more power because, of course, your battery is depleting if you're not plugged into the wall. So just bear in mind that if you are on a laptop, you'll have screen and sleep, but under two conditions, plugged in and on battery power. And then the last thing to talk about here is the performance and energy setting. Something that I see a lot is a lot of people, working in conservation, we're not supposed to be computer experts and whatever, but what I often see is when we're doing presentations or something like showing a film or a video, you're often running on battery power. And usually, computers will automatically reduce the performance of your laptop if you are on battery power. And so this slider will actually move down to here or maybe even down to super high energy savings when you're not plugged in, and that happens automatically. What that means is that you're doing a presentation or you're trying to open a file and everything seems laggy and slow. And that's because your computer is reducing the electricity that it's giving to its components, which slows them down. So if you come into this setting and you bump up the performance to maximum, this is where you would be able to change that, and you should get close to your full performance. That being said, if you're on a laptop and you need the full performance of your computer, I would suggest leaving it plugged in as when you need that full performance. You will always get, especially for laptops, you will get better performance if it has access to all of the electricity that it needs. On battery, depending on the manufacturer and the model, you might be limited physically by what the battery can output to the computer in terms of the performance that you're going to get. So it is something to just keep in mind and consider. This is where you would come to adjust that settings. There are additional power settings and power modes that you can see over here. Without these settings menu, anytime you see some of these clickable links, that might bring you to other settings or bring you to help menus on the web that you can see here. So that was an important one, which is why I thought to spend a little bit more time going through it. We're going to continue with the system settings here. Storage is pretty self-explanatory. This shows you all of your hard drives, SSDs, any sort of storage drive that is installed onto your computer. So that'll be hard drives, USBs, anything like that. And what this does is it basically looks at your different drives, your C drive, your D drive, and it analyzes it to figure out, what's in it, what is managed by your account, by other accounts, and so on. And this is quite interesting because you can see if there's like junk files taking up a lot of space on your computer, right? And you can use that to get rid of it. You can also go through and set default locations for where new content is saved. You can manage your different storage spaces. You can optimize your drive. You can set up automatic backups to particular drives. That's all done from here. Storage Sense is, as you can see, it'll automatically get rid of files that you don't need and content in your recycling bin. So you can set that up if you want or not. I'm not really going to go through tablet mode because it's not that important. Essentially, it just changes Windows interface a little bit to be better for people using the device with their hands, right? So if you're using a computer that becomes a tablet, like it detaches from its keyboard, this could help you a little bit, but I don't typically use it even when I'm using a touchscreen device. Multitasking, again, this logo, we're going to talk about this label, but it is right here on my desktop in my case. This relates to having multiple tasks open, how windows snap and align together. We're going to do a whole video tutorial on that and how to manage multiple windows at the same time and how to manage multiple workflows at the same time. So we're going to go through that later, but you can just look at the settings that I have here, and I would suggest that these are pretty good settings to have. Okay. So next is projecting to this PC. Again, I'm going to skip this because it's not something that I use or find to be commonly used. shared experiences, again, the same. Unless you're in an office where other people need to access files on your computer across the network directly, I would leave this off. It's also a bit of a security risk. Clipboard. So clipboard is interesting. A lot of people don't know what the clipboard is. Everybody knows what copy and paste is, but nobody realizes that when it's in between copy and paste, it lives on the clipboard. So when you copy or cut something in Windows, it is put onto your clipboard and waits there until you paste it. And whatever's at the top of your clipboard is what gets pasted. And so actually you can have a clipboard history. You can have it remember multiple things. You can even have it sync across devices. So you could copy something on one computer and paste it on something else, which is pretty cool. I don't use these features. It seems a bit overkill to me, but it is there as an option if you want that. Remote desktop, again, is not something I use. This would be basically accessing and using your computer remotely from another computer. So the last and most important thing in this settings menu is About. And this is probably one of the most useful pages in your system settings, and is something that a lot of people don't know how to find. This will tell you everything, well, not everything, but this will tell you a lot about your computer. And I've blocked out some things in here that are private information. But in short, you can see everything about your device, its name, its processor, the amount of RAM it has installed, the operating system type, the Windows build, the version that it's on, so on. You can even change your product key or your edition of Windows from here. And on the side, on the right-hand side, you have a ton of additional very important settings that we will do separate videos on at a later point in time. And so it's just giving you helpful, useful links to get to those same points. If you want to find this setting, something that I want to remind everybody is, again, everything is searchable. So when somebody asks me, oh, what CPU do you have in your PC? I might forget the name of it. So I just press the start button and I type About. And that first setting, you don't even have to finish typing it. I'm just going to click enter. It'll bring us straight there. And then I can find my processor, which is an overkill, super powerful processor. And very good value for money, actually. These AMD Ryzen processors are outcompeting Intel in many ways. And so I'm a big fan of not spending more money than I need to. So it's a good recommendation. Okay, I'm afraid to tell you that we're not done. That was only the first menu of many. Actually, we're going to skip devices as well, because this isn't a very important menu. This is basically just where you see everything that you have at one point connected to your computer or not. So printer, scanners, mouse, and so on. There's a few settings in here that might be worth just discussing a little bit. The first is if you wanted to add a new Bluetooth device, this is where you would do it. If it's the first time you're adding it, you have to click this thing up here, Add Bluetooth or Other Device. And then you choose from a list. What is it? Is it a Bluetooth keyboard, mouse, pen, audio, something like that? Is it a wireless monitor, TV, or an other PC? Or is it something else? So you choose that type, and then what happens is your... oh, look. So it's given me a warning. Hey, it couldn't connect. Why? Because we haven't turned on Bluetooth. I'm an idiot. So actually, before we try to connect, we have to turn Bluetooth on. So there we go. Now Bluetooth is on, and now we can actually search for a Bluetooth device. Now with Bluetooth, you have to tell the device to be searchable. So if it's your phone, or if it's a headphone, or a speakers, or a projector, you would have to press a button on that would make it searchable. And then this computer needs to search for it. And so once this computer starts searching for it, it'll come up with a list of available options. You click it, you agree that the code is the same on both, or sometimes there's no code and it just works. But that's how you would add a Bluetooth device to your computer for the first time. You can also remove them if you don't want it anymore connected to your device. So for example, this is a TV that we don't use anymore, so I'm going to remove that device. Are you sure? Yes. Done. So super easy and very easy to add back again if you want it. Printers and scanners, again, you could do it here, but typically I don't ever need to come to any of these other menus because it's automatic. You plug in your printer and it goes. It downloads the drivers automatically. You don't need to mess around with that. Bluetooth, you usually need to mess around a little bit to get it right. So I think I'm not going to go through all the rest of this. There's other, auto correcting and typing suggestions in here. There's all sorts of things about your mouse speed, your cursor speed, so on. You can go through these on your own, but these are not settings that I use hardly ever, so they're not that important to me. I'm also going to skip the phone because I don't actually link my phone to my computer. Enough lack of privacy as it is. I don't need everything connected, so that's fine with me. The next one we're going to go through is network and internet, and so this is a pretty important one, but there's only a few important things to understand. For example, we're not really going to talk about this dial-up thing. I don't even know why this is still there. We're also going to skip through the VPN. Everybody knows what airplane mode is already. So we're going to skip this proxy. We don't need to go through all of that. If you're curious, you can go through it and look at what it does, but don't be afraid of clicking buttons and exploring on your own. The status is where you would go to just see the status of your current internet connection. You have data usage here, which is quite interesting and useful, possibly. And then you also have this thing which will show the networks around you. So if you click on that, it's going to pop up with your available Wi-Fi networks in the area. This is actually the same thing as just clicking directly on this little button in your system tray here. And so there it goes. It pops it up. So same thing. This is something that is important to know where it is, but if you don't know how to adjust adapter settings, I wouldn't mess with it. But setting the adapter settings, these are your actual physical devices in your computer that are doing the communication. And so this is where you can uninstall them, reinstall them, update a driver if there is a problem with that. But really, you shouldn't ever need to mess with that. It should be automatically done, magically done by Windows 10's updating system. But that is how you would open this if you wanted to. For my nerds out there, if you right-click on your Wi-Fi and go to Properties, this is where you would be able to adjust your internet protocols for TCP/IPv4. And so you'd select on that, click Properties, and then you can either set that to use its address automatically or set a designated IP address if you want to do that. Messing around with this and changing it back, changing it from 1 to automatically will sometimes magically fix problems. So if you have a problem with your computer not connecting to your network, you can come in there and put like a 25555, one of those things in, and then set that, and then change it back to automatically, and that hopefully should kind of reset your... We'll go through other more advanced things at a later point in time. So that's just for my IT nerds out there. So that's where you would go to find that setting. It's important to know that it's there even if you don't know how to use it. So we'll close all that. You also, from here, you have your Wi-Fi, and again, it's some conditions about your Wi-Fi and how it works, so useful to know. You've got your hardware properties there, and then everything else, Ethernet, this is if you are plugged in by cable, you'd have some options in there. We don't need to discuss everything else, it's pretty self-explanatory, and none of these other ones are very useful or important. Okay, let's go to personalization. We're actually going to do a whole story on personalization. I'll dedicate a whole video to that. But this is where you would come to set your desktop background, your slideshows, your colors, your fonts, all that. So you've got these options on the left. I'm actually going to do a separate video on how to customize your start because it's more than just these options that you can do. I'll do another video on customizing the taskbar as well. Fonts, I don't really ever come here to use this setting because it's very easy to install and remove fonts. The same with themes. I don't really mess around with themes. However, there is an important button here that we'll talk about in a different video, which is right there, that desktop icon settings. The lock screen, it's important to know, this is when your screen is locked. This is where you would allow things to show or not on your lock screen. You can also set the pictures for your lock screen and get tips and so on. Colors, this is where you would choose your mode. So for example, if you guys have been wondering why my computer is all dark, if I go like this, well, now it's light again, just like yours probably is. This hurts my eyes, and I spend so much time looking at the computer that I actually am worried about damaging my eyes. So I always set this to dark mode. It's much softer on your eyes, and it's just less exhausting to work on a dark screen all day than a light screen. For the color, you can actually have it automatically pick an accent color from your desktop background. So if your background is changing colors, changing pictures throughout the day, the colors will change to match that color. It's kind of a cool thing. I don't typically use it, but you can do that. And then you have these options down here, which is to show the color on the following surfaces. So if I was to click Start, Task, and Action Center, then as you can see, it's changed this color a little bit to be like this blue color. And so my Start menu is now this blue color. Title bars and window borders would do this. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little bit blue line going around this window now. And so anytime I open something now, I've got this blue bar at the top, right? And so if I uncheck that, then it's no longer there. It's not going to affect these title bars at the top of files. So I'm just going to leave it dark like that for me. And the highlight color is like, for example, that Windows turns that color. You know, if I make it red, then Windows turns red. So that's that. That turns red. So I like this color. I'm going to leave it like that. And you know what? I might leave it on the start. Yeah, why not? Looks fine. We'll do a whole other tutorial on the background because I have a few things that I want to discuss with managing your desktop background, as well as with the start and taskbar. So customizing your desktop will be a video of itself. Let's go home. All right, we're getting there. So apps, this is an important thing to understand, but really only one important thing, which is your apps list. And so this is where you would come to uninstall a program. So I recommend that people come here from time to time just to make sure that you don't have programs installed that you don't recognize. Viruses and malware, they find their way, they sneak into your computer and they install themselves from time to time. If you're careful, you shouldn't ever have it, but this is where you would come to look for strange stuff on your computer. So it's good to scroll through and make sure you recognize everything that is installed. If you don't recognize it, you can Google it and look it up and see what it is. Like I didn't know what Busub was, so I looked it up and I figured out, no, it's from one of the programs I installed, and so on. So you can see all of the programs that you've installed here, and it will actually help you manage them and uninstall them if you want. Also, when you get a new computer, you might have a lot of bloatware and spamware. Like, and it's not really hacks, but it's stuff that is wasting space on your computer and is useless and oftentimes bothering you with ads and promotions and so on. So this is where you'd come to remove all that junk. Okay. And then while we're on it, over here on the left, you also have your default apps. I think we already went through this, but if not, so this is where you would basically set the application that is by default used for various tasks. So my default web browser I've set to Google Chrome. Oftentimes when you install a new program, it will ask you, hey, this program is really good at, playing videos. Do you want this to be your default video player? Yes or no? And if you say yes, then it will automatically bring you to this setting and automatically change it for you. You just have to click yes, But if you want to change it at a later point, this is where you would come to adjust it. Everything else here, I actually don't use. I don't use Windows built-in maps features. So you can look through this if you want. The last thing that I want to show you here is the startup options. And this is where you can turn off or on the apps that launch automatically when you turn on your computer. The more of these that are on, the slower your startup is going to be. So it's advisable to not have these on unless you really need them to turn on. And so for me, this is my speaker, software. So it's kind of useful that that turns on when I start the computer. And my Google Drive is also very important for me, that it starts automatically syncing all of our files when we turn on the computer. So this is Google Drive Sync, and it turns on automatically as soon as I log in. You can see it down there syncing away. All of these things will be visible from here, your system tray. So this is showing you your background tasks and background applications that are running as services or programs in the background. And they can be shut down usually by right-clicking and finding some sort of quit option or, close option. You'll also have your Windows ones like the speakers and the Wi-Fi and the microphone something. There's another way to adjust this. We're going to do a whole other video on the task manager, but I'll just quickly show you the task manager. So right-click on the taskbar, open your task manager, and go to Startup. Under Startup, this is exactly the same menu, right? So it's the same list of programs, and you can choose to disable or enable them when the computer starts up. And this will have a big impact on how long it takes your computer to be ready. You might find that you turn your computer on, and for the first 10 minutes, you can't do anything because your computer is very laggy. That might be because you have too many startup applications set to automatically start with your computer. So this is where you would come to adjust those settings. Typically, you can turn everything off. It will have no bearing on the behavior of your computer. So you really should decide what is turning on. It shouldn't be left to the computer to decide. All right, we're getting there. So let's go to accounts. So this is where you sign in. And so actually, as I may or may not have told you already, our NGO uses Google G Suite to manage all of our emails, all of our files, everything. So we have Google Drive, we have a G Suite admin account, and the faunainfocus.org email is actually managed through our G Suite platform. So it's essentially a Gmail. However, when creating a Microsoft account, you can use any email. So we used our Fauna in Focus Gmail email accounts to create our Microsoft accounts. And I strongly recommend that, especially if you're working for an organization or you're starting an organization, there is no real good reason not to create a separate user for your work. This is about separating that, your work persona from your professional persona. Not only does it look more professional if you're communicating from a work email, but it's also, just for your own sense of security and well-being, mental well-being. It's good to have separate systems. Don't use your personal email for everything. Save that for your friends and family, and then use your work email for your work tasks. So I have a Microsoft account that is just for my work tasks, and it's through my Fauna in Focus email. That Microsoft account allows me to sync my settings across different computers depending on where I log in. It allows me to remotely manage computers. So let's say I'm the manager of a small project and we have a number of laptops. Those laptops could all be set up for each of my users using their work email with a Microsoft account. And that means if they are, in a situation where the laptop is lost or stolen, as an administrator of those accounts, you could remotely access and manage those computers. You could lock them. You could even wipe them to secure data. This is all stuff that is built into Microsoft, but you have to sign in to your Microsoft account and be an administrator for all of the computers that you're using, and then create a secondary account for your staff that are working on it. But this is the advantage of using a Microsoft account rather than a local account. If you create a local account that's not registered to anything online and your computer is lost or stolen, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't track it, you can't find it, you can't lock it, you can't wipe the data that's on it. So it's just gone. So I strongly recommend, especially for professional work settings, have your staff use first of all, you as a project leader, you might want to be an administrator, or have your administrator, if you're not the team leader, have your administrator set up an admin account using a Microsoft account on all of the devices that are being used in the program, and then they can create a secondary account for you to log in using your Microsoft account. Once they do that, then essentially your laptops are kind of safe from theft, from damage, from getting lost. You can track them. You can use the GPS and the Wi-Fi settings to locate your missing laptops or computers, and you can remotely access them or wipe them or shut them down. So it's a very useful feature to sign into a Microsoft account. Here's where you would adjust your emails and your various additional accounts if you wanted to have other accounts set up. Your sign-in options. Windows will typically always ask you to create a PIN. This is like your backup PIN code to unlock your computer if you forget your password, or if you have a fancy computer and it has like a fingerprint sensor or an IR camera to do facial recognition. All of these things can be set as your sign-in method. My suggestion is to definitely make sure you have a PIN set up, and then use that if you don't have a fingerprint or a face. Password is also good as well, but make sure it's a secure password. And then there's some other settings here that you can go through and look at yourself about how the sign-in works. But this is where you would come to adjust your sign-in options, to change your password, and so on. All right, we're going to skip Access Work or School because, again, this would only be done if your Microsoft account is managed by a larger institution that has a deal with Microsoft and has, hundreds or thousands of users set up through Microsoft Outlook or something like that. So it's not really for smaller scale or individual uses. Family and other users. This is where you can have other users on this particular computer. So, let's say the administrator of the account would create the first account, but then they would need to add their staff, or whoever's going to use it. Or maybe you have a laptop that's like shared amongst a bunch of people for presentations. So you could call that like, NGO name presentation laptop. So you could create a second user for that purpose only. And you can make many users. We're not going to talk about setup as a kiosk, but that is a pretty cool feature that allows the entire laptop to essentially be locked for use as digital signage or interactive displays, for a public stage. It's for me, it's a bit overkill in terms of complexity, especially because you can accomplish a lot of the same things with PowerPoint, which we're going to be talking about in our very cool and exciting PowerPoint training videos that will be coming later. And then the last thing here is sync your settings. So again, just which settings you can keep synced across multiple computers when you log in. All right. Time and language. We're almost done here. Time and language is important to go through, especially for people working in other countries, because setting your date, time, region, and language is quite a useful thing to know how to do. So here's where you'd come to adjust your date and time. You can set it to be automatic or manually. The same with your region. Now, when you're setting the region, whatever region you set will actually determine sometimes what apps and so on you can install and how the Windows is set up. And so for me personally, I always recommend just setting it to US because that's what I know, being an American, but you're welcome to set it to another location if you want. Now, language. This is very important. You have to consider a few things. The first is the Windows display language. So what I mean by that is everything that you're seeing right now, this is Windows, right? These are all settings, menus, and text that you're seeing on the side of your computer, and it's all in English because I've set this to English. You can change that, but it takes a while to download the new languages, and it takes a bit of an update to your computer to change all of your everythings, your settings menu to your another language. And the confusing thing is that once you do that, it actually becomes a little bit harder for you to problem solve on your computer. Because let's say some problem comes up and you Google, hey, how do I fix this problem? Well, most of the results are going to be in English. And so they'll be navigating you through menus and telling you to click buttons in English, but you've got to translate everything into your other language. So if you're confident with your English, I would suggest just keeping Windows in English. It will make it easier for you to get help if you need to find something. If I went to a computer and it was all in Japanese, I wouldn't know what buttons to push because I wouldn't remember what buttons do what. I need to be able to read it to know what I'm looking at. So obviously it's up to you, and you can set it to whatever language you'd like, but I'm going to leave mine in English. And this is where you would add languages. Now, this isn't changing the language of the computer. This is changing the language available for typing. So let's go ahead and use Khmer as an example. So you'll click on that, and you just start typing Khmer. There you go. And you click on that, and next. So it's going to search for the language features, and once that's done, it's just a simple matter of clicking install. And the cool thing is that actually, in some cases, you will have multiple keyboards for each language. And so what I found is that with Khmer, many of my staff and colleagues and students are used to using a particular keyboard for typing. Of course, you don't have necessarily the keys with the Khmer alphabet. So instead, you need to just know where these keys are. And so there's different versions of that arrangement, that layout. And this is something that I know a lot of people need, and they have no idea how to get it set up on their computers, and it is very easy. So you simply come here to language, you add Khmer first as your language, and then you would go to options. And under options, you have the option to add a keyboard. So before I do that, I'll just show you. The fact that I've now added 2 languages means that I now have this thing in the corner. And as you can see, when I click it, it allows me to switch between these 2 languages. You can also do that by pressing, I always forget, Alt-Shift. So Alt-Shift on the keyboard will toggle between your 2 languages that you've installed. However, the Khmer keyboard is not good enough. We want to add more. So we're going to select this, add keyboard, and there's Nida. So this is the Khmer Nida keyboard. And so once I close this now when I switch, you'll actually see that I have 3 languages, English, Khmer, and Khmer Nida. And so this is the one that I find most people need the most. So there you go. So that's how you add a language and adjust the keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and remove that because I don't need it for now. And speech will be just information about your speech recognition and your built-in computer voice. This is when your computer's talking to you and so on. This is not a very important thing. You can also get started here to set up your microphone so that it recognizes your voice. I think you need to make sure you have a Microsoft account for that to work. All right. I think we have covered all of that. We covered that. We're going to skip that, skip that. We're going to skip that. Let's go to privacy and then updates, and then we're done. Sorry this video is going so long, but again, this is important to be a little bit familiar with, if not an expert. Expertise is never needed. You know, you need to know a little bit about a lot. Okay, so here you go. You've got some basic privacy settings. You can go through all of these things and give... you can check your, first of all, this is your Windows permissions. So this first section up here is going to be what information are you sharing with Microsoft, right? And you can go through that and adjust that as you need. It's really up to you. You should read through these things and make a moral decision about how much of your personal stuff you're willing to share. All right. The next thing is the app permissions. And this is important because if you miss this or if you need to change it later, it's important to know where to come to find it. And so basically the app permissions is basically saying which of your applications have permission to, and then, you know, these following things. So in this case, it's location is the first option. So which apps do you give permission to access your location? And here's your list, right? So if I saw, for example, oh, Maps doesn't have my location. You know what? I'm going to say that it would be useful for the Maps to be able to have my location. I'm also going to give permission to Weather to know my location because I would like to get the weather for where I am. That's a convenience for me. I'm willing to let Windows know where I am so that I can get the weather. However, my camera doesn't need to know the location. My mail doesn't need to know my location, so on. So I'm going to leave those to off. You can also clear your location history on the device. You can set a default location and so on. So there's a lot of things you can do from here. And the same is true for everything. You know, if I see an app that just doesn't, like Feedback Hub, this is where you provide feedback to Windows. It doesn't need access to my camera. I'm not going to take a picture of myself to get like this. It just doesn't need access to my camera. Skype definitely does need access to my camera. So you can go through and decide, you know, what need access. Camera probably needs access to the camera. So you can decide what you want to keep on and what you want to keep off. It's totally up to you. And this is where you would come to adjust it in the future should you need to, change permission. Or if something is asking for permission and you miss the box or you click the wrong button, you can come back here and edit it. All right. And so, yeah, there's lots of permissions that you can set there, going from, you know, who's allowed to notify you, who can access your contacts, who can see your phone calls, who can read your emails, and so on and so on. So tons and tons of permissions that you can set there. And it is probably a good idea for you to go through each one and see what permissions you're giving, because a lot of us just blindly accept, and it's not necessarily critical to do that. So sometimes, you know, go through it, see what you're willing to, see what you're currently sharing, and decide if you're okay with that or not. Okay. And the last one is update and security. So I'm actually going to do a different video on Windows security because, as you'll see, this one opens a separate window. It's actually a separate settings menu built into the settings. So Windows security is its own thing. And it's pretty self-explanatory, right? So it gives you kind of this overview panel. You can see your virus status, and the built-in Windows firewall is pretty good right now. In the past, you know, Windows computers always were plagued by viruses. You needed to download, you know, antivirus programs and McAfee and blah, blah, blah. The built-in Windows Defender is fine in 99% of the cases. So I actually don't have any virus protection installed, but if you do want one, AVG Free is one of the best rated ones out there. It's a little bit annoying because it constantly gives you pop-ups to upgrade to the paid version, but there is a free version. You just have to be very careful with checking the buttons that you're not, you know, signing up for a trial of the pro paid version. So if you want the free version, you're looking for AVG Free, and then do everything in your power to avoid signing up for the pro trial. So, Anyways, this is all sorts of security issues for your account, for your personal information accessed from that separate window. Windows Update. When you click this button, it will check for an update, and you can choose to download and install updates. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that right now, and we'll see what updates are available. It is important to keep your computer up to date. However, personally, I'm not a big fan of updates because when things change, sometimes it makes it harder for me to do something that I used to know how to do, and I don't really like it if they change it and it feels to me like it's changing for the worse. And unfortunately, with Windows now, there is no way to permanently stop updates. That's one of the downsides of Windows 10. The upsides are that Windows 10 is basically free nowadays. You don't need to buy Windows separately. It pretty much is, it's a freebie. There's ways to download and install it legally without really paying anything. And Windows is giving it away because people are now using it as a service. So what you pay for with Windows is all the other stuff that you're going to be doing with the computer, like your Office programs and so on. And the other upside of having Windows always up to date is for security. And nowadays, hackers and malware and ransomware, it's a constant battle. And so if you let your computer get out of date, you actually might be contributing to the problem by being kind of like a host for viruses and hackers and malware. Whereas if they're up to date, the people at Microsoft are able to kind of fight back and keep one step ahead of the the trouble people. So I suggest keeping your Windows up to date as often as possible. What I do suggest is if you are about to go into the field and you won't have access to the internet or to repair shops or anything like that, pause your updates before you go. So there's a button right here to pause the updates. I had a situation when I was working in Nigeria where a laptop updated itself and then refused to work. There was some mistake in the Windows update that conflicted with a driver update for my graphics card, and the graphics card would not work. It literally, the screen wouldn't turn on. I could hear the computer. It was working fine. I could hear it log in. I could hear it start up. I could hear sounds it made if I clicked on the wrong button, and it was working fine, but I could not get a display out of it. So then, of course, I was headed into the field to do some radio tracking, and I needed my computer to do it, and I couldn't do it, so I was stuck in the office for a day, not being able to go and do my job because of this stupid Windows update. So if you're about to head off and do some important work or a presentation or something, pause your updates. Just if it's working, pause your updates. You also have a few options here for like advanced options, view update history. This is if you have a problem, you can see some other options for how updates work. And then backup would be where you would go if you want to basically say, hey, everything is working right now. I want to back up my whole computer history right now. You can do that from here. Troubleshoot and recovery, these are important. So troubleshoot will just help you get through various problems for anything in your computer. And recovery, this is important. So if you have a really, really critical problem with your computer, this is where you would come to help reset your computer. First of all, if you do update your computer and you find a serious problem or a conflict with one of your programs, there's this option to go back to the previous versions of Windows 10. So tomorrow, when this update is finished, that option will become available for me. Bear in mind that it's not a permanent solution, but hopefully they will have fixed the problems by the time it updates itself again. If you really want to reset your computer completely, this option will actually allow you to reset your computer and choose to remove everything or not at all. And so this is what you would do if you wanted to, for example, like give your computer to a friend, and so you want to wipe everything off of the computer. So it'll walk you through the menu options of how to do that. And then advanced startup, if you restart this, it will basically launch into a kind of a safe boot mode that will give you a bunch of additional options in terms of recovering your old computer. My strongest suggestion for anything on this page is before you do any of this, take all of your important information and save it onto an external hard drive. And What I mean by that is your files, your folders, and your projects that you're working on, your photos, your videos, your documents, your Excel spreadsheets, all of it. Copy it off of the computer onto an external drive, because there is a possibility that some of these options will wipe your drives and reinstall Windows from scratch. The downside of that is it will uninstall all of your programs, meaning you'll have to reinstall your programs again, which is annoying. But you have a clean version of Windows, you have a clean computer, it'll behave like it's brand new. And in fact, it's so powerful that I actually do this about once every 2 years. Computers do slow down as more and more junk gets compiled into them. So for me, about once every 18 to 24 months, I back everything up off onto an external hard drive. Actually, I do backups once a month anyways, but about once every 2 years, I completely wipe everything off of my system and set it up from scratch again using this menu. And what it does is it basically gives me a computer that runs like a brand new machine every 2 years. And then I just copy all my applications back on and copy all my programs back on. And it takes a while. It takes a bit of work and planning, and you have to be very careful not to delete something that you need. But if you do it right, it takes like half a day, and you're up and running again soon on a brand new system. This can be a great way to keep older computers alive for longer. All right. Activation is related to your product key for Windows. Find My Device is how you locate it. And everything else you don't need to know about. And I think that's it, guys. So that was a long introduction video. Thank you very much for sticking through the whole thing to the end. Again, I am not an expert in every single one of these settings menus. However, it is important just to know that they're there. This will be helpful in the long run when you're looking for a particular setting to adjust. Now you at least have a rough idea of what's available and how to find it. Don't forget to just search for settings that you want. If you want to uninstall something, just type uninstall. If you want to, remove a font or add a font, type fonts and see what happens. You have all sorts of helpful shortcuts to search for a particular setting that you're looking for. You can do it from here, and you can do it directly from the start menu. So once again, all of these videos are designed just to help us all be better at our jobs, right? And so we're starting with the basics, and we will get more advanced as these videos go through. This one was a longer video because I wanted to go through all of the settings in one go. However, I'll have a few other shorter videos highlighting some of the particular settings and customizations that I think are important to go through in a little bit more detail. But those will be much shorter videos as well. So once again, thanks for your time, and don't be afraid to watch these videos a few times until you're confident and comfortable with finding what you need to find. So see you guys in the next one.